artist and educator and solopreneur and one of the most incredible businesswomen I've ever met, seriously. She has been creating all kinds of incredible art and finding ways to connect it with people on a broader scale, not just this rarefied gallery setting, which a lot of people don't know about or are really intimidated about. And so you've been doing that for a long time, and you've been running businesses for a long time, and you've been organizing artists as a way to build community. And that's the other part of that community building, is something that I've always been really impressed with, and also really amazed at how you bring people together through your artwork and through the media of artwork. So thank you. So thanks for being here.
Sure.
Yeah.
You're so welcome. I feel so special. I can die now.
Well, and so this conversation that we're going to dive into today started because we were just talking loosely, and there were some insights that you had about creativity and depression and how we deal with adversity as artists, but also just as human beings, and some of the ways that I heard you talking about creativity. In both, it was a really interesting shift. So I think we'll dig into that, because there was a way you were talking about creativity that was leading you into and out of this experience that we talked about, in terms of, getting to the point where you're like, well, I'm done with this life. This is enough. And then there's a measure of creativity that stepped in and said, well, wait, I got to clean my windows first. Mm-hmm. And I thought, oh, there's something in that. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. So can you, can we start just by kind of laying out, you said, you were telling me about, roughly 2 years ago, you got to this place where you're like, fuck this. I can't, this is not working for me.
Yeah. About a couple of years ago, I started to burn my paintings. Because I have a lot of them. And I feel like a lot of them are good. I mean, some of them are obviously better than others. But I started to feel like they were just kind of there, and they weren't generating any new energy, and they were only holding me back into the possibilities of what they could be. And so I started to burn them, but of course I had to videotape them because I'm an artist, so I'm like, I'm just going to document this. So it wasn't just about destroying, it was also about, ultimately, after I created and destruction. It's like that Sheila Nagig thing. I don't know if you know that
yeah.
God, the goddess that's like the goddess of creativity and destruction. It's like the same, I think it's the same thing, right? Twice. So yeah. Anyway, so once I actually videotaped it, I realized, okay, when I videotape, I'm like, okay, there's all this stuff I have to do. I have to put it in a good backdrop. I have to set it up so it doesn't set my yard on fire. I have to, how do I set a painting? Anyway, after I burnt it, it was so beautiful. It was like one of the most beautiful things. And then suddenly I was like, I have to make a video series of these. It's like, I just gave myself more artwork to make. And then at that point, I'm like, okay, I'm just an artist. It's just the way it's going to be. I'm just going to make art. And that's just the way it's going to be, no matter whether I destroy it or create it or whatever you do, right? So that was an interesting moment, because that was a couple of years ago. It was a really hard, it was a time of real down. Like, who wants this stuff? No one wants it. No one buys it. Not that no one buys it. I shouldn't say that. People do buy it. There are some people who do buy it, and there are people who do support me. So it's like,
but as artists, it's never as many as we hope it will be.
It never is. It never quite.
Unless you're like Jeff Koons, and then you could sneeze on a tissue and people will buy it.
Right. It never quite pays your rent. It never gets you health insurance. It never does all those things you really, really need to do. It gets you to the point where I can buy more paint. And I can
right.
And I'm not getting kicked out of my house yet.
In that process, when you're talking about, so I decided to destroy this, and there's a piece in there that I'm really interested in about destroying our idea of ourself, because in some ways that's what I see. Part of what you were doing was you take all this old stuff that you've made, that you've poured yourself into, and you're literally destroying the old version of you.
Yeah, and what happens, which is the most beautiful thing, which is like part of what your shamanistic friend and those people at Google need to pay attention to, is that when you actually burn it, if you're in touch with that moment, I'm very surprised I actually was, because sometimes I'm not, I don't watch too much TV. But when you're in touch with that moment, the energy of the flame and the fire and the stuff that comes out of that, you can actually feel the creative energy releasing, and you can actually feel the possibilities in that energy.
Yeah.
And it releases the old attachment to what was buried in there, the struggle, the frustration. I mean, it's a little bit, Marie Kondo, but it's
well, it's also kind of shamanistic, because if you look at what are the elements that create the world, right? Earth, air, fire, water are the most common ones. You have to have earth and you have to have fire in order to create anything else, because fire generates energy.
Right.
So what you're talking about is literally that energetic process.
Right. It is. It's all about the energy. It's all about finding the energy, and wherever it was also kind of satisfying me at that moment, because I teach. So I watch these younger artists and I think, I'm the older artist now. I have to I now give my knowledge away so that, younger artists can glean from the, bad choices or good choices or whatever happened in my life.
Choices, period.
Yeah. You kind of have to share, right? It's like what we're doing. So in that process of burning, the release of that energy was also like, it felt like, this is an act of giving. I'm now giving away that old pent up creative energy that was stuck in those pieces that didn't really resolve, to kind of move along. And did you think I was this spiritual? I don't think.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Sometimes I wonder.
So the background in this for people watching this later is, we used to live across the street from each other.
Yes, we did.
And we would text each other. Whoever woke up first would text the other person and say, coffee's on. And the other person would show up at the front door with a mug in hand.
That's right.
We'd have an hour-long conversation about whatever, usually art, life, whatever was going on. And then we would start our days and go back across the street and whatever do. But
it was a great time.
This kind of conversation for ages. So
it was a wonderful memory to have. I always look. I look up Fifth Street and I'm like, there it was.
Yep, there it was. And then funny who moved in after.
Yeah, that was funny too.
Yeah. So back to fire and destruction and letting go, because in some ways there's, we could describe that. I mean, if you're coming from an Eastern thinking, you could describe that as, I'm dissolving karma by burning these paintings. Right? It's this release of all this stuff that didn't go anywhere else.
It really does. It created a new venue for making new work, and it also opened me up to the possibilities of giving. Giving back. It's not like I haven't given back, but it allowed me to enter that space a lot more generously. So, and it's actually a pretty good thing. But over time. The thing we talked about when it comes to quote the cleaning the windows was I was talked into applying for a teaching job that I knew I wouldn't get, and I knew I wouldn't get considered for, but I knew I deserved it. Like I knew it should have been. Yeah. I should have been considered. So because it was like, if I don't apply for this job, I'm going to be looked at like I'm a coward and giving up. Right. If I do apply for this job, I'm going to not get it, and I'm going to fall into some major level of depression. And I thought, well, okay, minimum thing. They're going to give me an interview. They have to give me an interview because I've been working here for 18 years. They had to give me an interview. They didn't give me an interview. They never called me. They never gave me an interview. They never talked to me. And I was like, well, I'm an adjunct. So, there are adjuncts out there. Right. So they didn't give me an interview for the full-time position that I was more than capable of, of being that person. And I fell into what am I doing? Why am I alive anymore? I'm not even relevant. Like, you get into that place where it's like, beat me so, I'm so invisible and bad, and I've had enough, and I've been struggling all this time. And so I did decide last summer that I was going to end my life after that. I mean, and it wasn't like, we talked about depression, but it wasn't really about being depressed so much. It was just being like, fuck, enough.
Yeah.
Not enough.
It was a very conscious thought and decision.
Yeah, it was a very conscious thought and decision. And I was planning, I was like, I'll organize everything for my kids. I'll make sure that everything's cataloged, all the stuff I own or have, and make sure the artwork maybe can bring them in some money in their lives. Maybe I won't do it for maybe not. I was like, oh, that's good. Maybe that'll work. I'll make it easier for them. Right. They can burn what they want if they want to, or they can sell it. Maybe somebody will take it on as a, an estate quote. Who knows? Maybe it'll actually be something. I'll try to make that happen for them. So that made me feel good. And I was like, good, that's a good reason to die. So then,
got it.
Yeah, right. So, my partner's like, yeah, sure. Let me know when we'll make it happen. I got some really good bullets. I'm like, no, I don't want blood. I just want to go freeze myself somewhere, like go die somewhere. It was like, I didn't want blood or like violence. I don't think that would have worked. But, so I was really going through this, and I was talking to my friends about it. I wasn't like thinking this was secret. It wasn't like I wasn't going to go do this in some skulky way. That wasn't, first of all, that's not me.
Yeah. No, really not you.
No, I live out loud. I live out there. Whatever it is, it's there.
Yep.
And it's not about giving up. It was more about finishing.
That's a really beautiful way to put it, because that's kind of how I look at it as well. Is it's one thing, and I like that you make the distinction between it's not out of depression or out of feeling like there's nothing more, I'm giving up, I can't take this anymore. It's more like, I think I might be done, which is a very different headspace to be coming from, or heart space to be coming from.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. I think that's, because it's like, I think I'm done. I think I've done my life's work. I brought my beautiful children into this world. I experienced many, many things. I've been a lot of places. I think that what I'm doing maybe might be complete, because I couldn't figure out, after I didn't get considered for the job, I couldn't figure out what my worth was in the world anymore. I couldn't. And then if I can't keep myself busy with the idea that, okay, I just burnt the paintings and now I can make videos of it. If that wasn't exciting to me anymore, I don't want to be alive every day. There was nothing keeping me alive.
It wasn't just, from what you were telling me, it wasn't just I didn't get the teaching. It was also that there was this kind of diminution of your work, or the impetus for your work too. That so everything kind of came to this point of, now what?
Right. Now what? So I thought, my kids seem happy. I put them out in the world. Not that they wouldn't need me on some level at some point, but, they could find someone else to watch their kids if they have them. I don't know. I could be like, a legend.
Yeah.
Whatever. It was like, that's kind of where I was with it. So when I was really convinced that this was going to happen. I was very convinced. And there were friends like trying to understand it, and friends, I want to say talking me out of it, but trying to make me understand I was loved. And I knew I was loved. I didn't think I wasn't loved by my friends. I have wonderful friends, as you are a big, wonderful friend. But, I don't spend a lot of time with people. Like I spend a lot of time alone. More of a solitary person. And that means that you have to kind of be content with your activities, right? Your activities need to drive you. And that wasn't coming. So right before my 60th birthday, I was sitting outside and looking at the house. And this is when we came in with the windows. So I was sitting outside, and I was like, all right, I'm ready. Okay, well, this might be my last summer. Okay, that's good. This is a good summer. This is nice. It's pretty out. I'm enjoying this. I've seen this like almost 60 times now, this change of season. That's cool enough. How much more do we expect, right? How much more do you get out of a life? I got a great life.
Right.
And then I'm looking at the house, I'm like, but if I'm going to spend this summer, I don't want the windows to be dirty. I want to be able to see clearly through those windows. I want them to be clean.
I love that metaphor. I really do. I mean, I know it was an actual thing, but I also love how it works as a metaphor.
It does work as a metaphor. And actually the activity of actually cleaning the windows became, in a way, like burning the paintings. Another reason to be alive.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it kind of shifts you. It's like, if you give up on like you're shedding your old stuff and your old expectations and your old thoughts, mm-hmm. Each day, each moment, each perception becomes like this little gem.
Yeah.
And it's still with me now. I mean, I'm still right there with it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think, why am I doing this? I think I'm doing this now.
Yeah.
If I die tomorrow, I die tomorrow. This is what I'm doing now.
But, you know, it's also what I hear in all of this is, especially like between the burning of the paintings and the cleaning of the windows, which are physical acts which represent on some level a literal clearing away and a willingness to look at what is right in front of you now, not through dirty glass, not through preconceptions, not through old ideas.
That's beautiful. Mm-hmm.
But that's what you did. I mean, that's what I see you did.
Mm. That was just a beautiful way of putting it.
Oh, well, thank you.
Put it all
Feeling inspired by you. So yes. So where do you see yourself sitting now in this existence kind of thing?
I see myself living every day, daily, a little bit more fully, unless I have less. You know, the conversation we had right before we started was, you know, the struggle with technology. Like,
yeah.
I have all of these expectations of, quote, you know, I'm one of those, you know, getting shit done people, you know, like getting shit done. So when I wake up in the morning, I think, okay, I'm teaching remotely. I have this class I'm building.
Mm-hmm.
I want to understand VidGrid, and I want to understand how to put a questionnaire in VidGrid today. And then like I get an email from a student who's like, Miss, I need to upload my JPEGs to your blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, Canvas, don't put it in Canvas. Don't put it. And then you wind up distracted by this whole other level of technology. And then some alarm goes off and says, I have a meeting with you. It's like, fuck the VidGrid thing. That's not thing. But I'm a lot more forgiving about that, unless it's like, you know what?
Yeah.
It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It's a lot less, I'm a lot less hard on myself than I was. So which actually gives me permission to be less hard on other people, which is actually softening up my entire life, which is actually kind of nice.
Yeah. I've come to a similar place. So I moved out to Colorado 3 months ago.
Only been 2 months, like right in the middle of COVID.
February 15th, I moved out. And February 16th, I tripped and fell into a really sturdy wooden bench and broke 6 ribs very badly. And I will say, broken ribs does hurt a fuckload. Mm-hmm. However, what I realized afterwards, so I fell, and my friend who was with me was there, and she called the EMTs, and the guy who was a restaurant, there was a guy at one of the waiters was at the bar, and he saw me kind of disappear from the doorway and was out within 2 seconds. He happened to be a wilderness first responder. So I was very lucky in that. Yeah. Guy he summited Everest and all, I mean, literally like major wilderness. Yeah. So there I am, and I am gasping for breath because I hit so hard that it took me probably 4 or 5 minutes to get my breath back.
Wow. And
in that 4 or 5 minutes, what I experienced was this really interesting kind of dual existence of, this hurts like hell, and I just need to concentrate on breathing and not worry about anything else. I simply need to concentrate on breathing, because until I can get my breath regulated, I can't do anything else. And then what happened was, it kept hurting. Like there was physical pain, but the EMTs showed up and they're like, oh, we have to move you. And I just rolled over, and they're like, oh, wow. Okay. And I was joking with them and asking them very, like questions like, what do you think I should, do you need to take me to the hospital? What has to happen? I'm pretty sure I broke some ribs, and same thing in the ER and, you know, getting the x-rays. And what I realized later was all these people around me they couldn't understand how, like, until they saw the x-rays and saw how bad the breaks were. Mm-hmm. None of them thought I had broken any ribs because I wasn't suffering. I was in pain, mm-hmm. but I wasn't suffering.
You were observing. You were answering to it a little bit.
I was aware that, yeah, I mean, I'm in physical pain, but I was not suffering. And what I also, you know, the thing that this whole experience that you had, mm-hmm. that's what I also hear in that, is that there may have been some levels of pain, frustration, but there, at the burning of the paintings was where you let go of this suffering.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense, because it is, and I think I never understood, you know, I grew up Catholic. So growing up Catholic, which is different from growing up Jewish, because when you grow up in this one way, maybe just in this one way, is that
not having grown up either, I have no idea. So.
Oh, but you
I'm technically
Jewish, but you didn't really grow up as a Jew.
Yeah, I grew up as a socialist singing, you know, Pete Seeger songs.
That's kind of Jewish. That's like growing up as a Jew.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so, but growing up Catholic, one of the biggest things that happens is that you're told that life is suffering, you know, and that Jesus released you from suffering. And it's like, it's bullshit. You know, I think there is suffering. Yeah. And I didn't understand that. I didn't understand what that meant, to release you of suffering, like to actually offer mm-hmm. suffering, to actually take it out of yourself and put it externally, until I started to burn those paintings.
Yeah.
I think that what you're saying makes sense. It's like it's external, becomes somewhere else, right?
Yeah. It's, you know, it's interesting. I heard somebody recently talking about that difference between pain and suffering. And when we actually understand the difference mm-hmm. on a physiologic level mm-hmm. or an emotional level, it's easier to separate them. Mm-hmm. And he used the example actually of Jesus being nailed to the cross. Mm-hmm. And he said, you know, imagine for a moment that you are Jesus and you're being nailed to this cross. If you are completely wedded to your suffering, you would be screaming, you would be cursing, you would be whatever, right?
Right.
Yet what he did, or what's told, is as he's being nailed to the cross, he says calmly, they know not what they do. Mm-hmm. Now, it doesn't mean there's no physical pain, but clearly the man was not suffering his pain.
Right.
And I think that's a really key thing, that if we learn how to separate our pain and suffering our pain, because the suffering is the thing we tell ourselves the pain means. Mm-hmm. Pain just means we're going to stay alive.
Pain, right? It's just sensation. It's a sensation. It's not a pleasant sensation, but
it's positive.
Right.
I mean, think about it. If we didn't have pain, right? Like the areas of our bodies where we typically pierce are the areas that do not have that much pain. Most people, right? Earlobes, nose, right? Yeah. Navel. Yeah. If we had no pain anywhere in the body, think of what we would have done to our body, right? We'd like,
good thing
all kinds of crazy stuff because there's no physical pain. So pain is there to keep us alive. But suffering,
that might be, you know, that might explain. I'm not always totally understanding when people hurt themselves, like the cutters. You know, people who actually just do that just to feel pain. But I think what you're saying is that they're feeling that they're alive. Like, you know, it's making them feel something.
It's also not only that does it make us feel something, but pain is inherent to the desire to stay alive. Mm-hmm. Because if we did not have, so pain reminds us that's not a thing that you want to do if you want to stay alive. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, that's what it's there for.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Yes, that does make sense. It makes absolute sense.
So, yeah. So when we you know, and then in this whole process that you're talking about, with starting with, you know, burning the paintings and that release, and then cleaning the windows and literally giving yourself a new view on the world. What I also, you know, there is that like letting go of suffering. So now I'm curious, if you think about where you are now in your life and what's going on now, how do you see having let go of suffering to a certain extent?
Yeah, that's a really, really important question, because that's ultimately how everything has manifested itself now. So it's how you define what your suffering is. And what I discovered that my suffering was not really understanding that the work I was doing was inherently good work, yet the avenues to which my work could be, I could be financially benefiting from my work, whether teaching or showing or selling, right, weren't happening, were not the fault of anybody rejecting me. It wasn't a rejection thing. And I think that was the big thing about the teaching. It felt so like a huge level of rejection. So it wasn't about the rejection so much as it is about the fact that people are there to help you if they can, if they understand how to help you. So if they understand how to propel your own your work forward, or if there's a path to help you find it so that you can move through it. But that's a really hard thing to do for somebody. And I think I was expecting that there should be some, quote, somebody like a daddy, you know, to help.
They would know automatically how to help you through it.
Right, to how to open a path. And maybe I think that I think that what I did was I minimized my own power, and meaning that I didn't realize how powerful I actually am, and that or how confident I come across. In which case, then
yes,
there's that you don't really realize that.
Yeah.
You think that because you feel so insecure inside.
Yeah.
And there's this like thing going, I am so insecure inside. It's like, really?
Which in itself is really powerful. It's like there's this really powerful message we carry around that we're really insecure. It's like, wait a minute, do you hear what we're like? Am I aware of what I'm telling myself? Yeah.
So I think what I had done was expected that there was going to be this path opened up somewhere, and so many opportunities for people to help me. But you know, I don't think anybody really knows why something succeeds, or why something sells, or why something becomes. I mean, I remember talking to Elizabeth Gilbert about Eat, Pray, Love. I remember talking to her about that. She's the one who bought Amy's house, by the way. I'm going to say that. So
she actually bought the house I was going to buy when I got married to Paul. She bought that one first, and then when I moved from Frenchtown, she bought my house. So we were joking about she keeps buying my houses.
She keeps buying your houses.
Yeah.
She's a lovely person. She's very generous.
Yeah.
But she and I talked about her book, her Eat, Pray, Love book. And I don't know if I'm reaching any confidences or anything like that.
You're not.
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure you're not.
Probably not. She's pretty out there with who she is too.
Yeah.
I think that, I read her book, The Last American Man, before she wrote Eat, Pray, Love, and I absolutely loved that book. And partially because it connected with my life. So when I met her, she was like happy someone had read Last American Man and really loved it before Eat, Pray, Love, because she never really understood why Eat, Pray, Love got so famous. She didn't understand the path of that trajectory. She didn't necessarily feel like it was her best writing. It wasn't in a good place when she wrote that book. So, and I think that, there was this sense that you don't understand what's successful or why. And you don't understand, it's like something takes hold and just kind of pushes that trajectory forward, and it just happens. I mean, I think that there's always portals and excuses or reasons you can describe, like someone says, oh, she's so famous because her mother was so famous. But there's a lot of famous people with kids, and they're not all famous, and they're not all successful. And
I mean, part of why I think that book because I think the ones that she's written since then are considerably more well-written and more in-depth. But I really do think part of that particular book hit our culture at a time when it was so important to have somebody saying something like that.
Yeah, well, that's what happens, right? I think that's what happens. I think when there's a portal and there's a reason, and that's like when you're talking about your lungs getting, the breath getting out of you.
Yeah.
How prescient that is with COVID-19. It's all about attacking lungs, right?
Yeah, and it was 2 weeks before it all happened.
Right.
That I literally had to learn. I learned in those 4 minutes, because I think it was 4 to 5 minutes, because they were all sitting around me just watching me. Mm-hmm. I learned that I could pay attention to my breath. Mm-hmm. Not that I had to, but I could. And it was so interesting. In 4 minutes, you can learn a lot of really in-depth stuff about what breath really is. Wow. And the mechanics of it, because I had to almost tell my brain, move the diaphragm down, move the diaphragm up, mm-hmm. stop clenching, mm-hmm. refill the lung. And going through those steps, in some ways that's my cleaning my windows mm-hmm. moment.
Right. Yeah. And that's amazing. That's kind of beautiful. I mean, really, I think because you could feel how it felt going in, right? You could feel that pain. So you had to kind of, create a comfortable pathway for the air to go in.
And it's such an interesting experience. Again, painful, but physically painful, but a really interesting experience to have to allow your breath and to be conscious of what it feels like not to be able to take a breath in. Mm-hmm. Like now, I'm pretty sure, and now I know, like if I was drowning, I know what the first minute is going to feel like.
Wow.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Can't take a breath in, uh-huh. and your mind is going, what the fuck's going on? Uh-huh. Uh-huh. And you can't take a breath in. Mm-hmm.
So you really looked at, in a way, you looked at death, really.
Yeah. In to a time, little, yeah.
But that's our first connection with a life, is our breath, right? Yeah. I mean, about the baby crying when it comes out. I mean, the crying, and like you were talking about pain. I mean, that baby's in pain. It's like, damn.
Yeah. It was all warm and cozy. What the hell's this?
Nice in there.
And the first thing we do when we're born is we inhale, and the last thing we do is exhale.
Mm-hmm. Lovely metaphor.
So our whole life is a metaphor for a breath, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's one long breath.
It's lovely.
Yeah.
You are filled with poetic little.
I've been writing a lot.
I could tell.
But it's, it's also, I'm 56 now. And so I think there's something, you were talking a little bit earlier about, like, I'm 60, I've had a good life, I've kind of done a lot. I've started to, I recognize what I've accomplished. I've come into who I am.
Yeah, you know what you're good at, you know what you like to do,
Yeah. I think there's something really valuable in taking the time to do that work. Mm-hmm. And to see where it gets us. I mean, part of this conversation that we're having is like, so where does all this stuff get us? Right?
Gets us to the end of the day.
Yeah.
And maybe help someone else get to the end of their day a little bit.
It also gives us a way of reframing the way we look at why we're here, what we're doing, all the bigger, the big questions about life. Like, it's not making money, it's not getting this job. When you're 20, it's like, am I going to have this relationship, or am I going to have this job, or am I going to get this promotion?
You have your whole life in front of you with all the possibilities that are told. Life, right? It changes when you get older.
Yeah, and I think and I don't think it's necessarily tied to a specific age, mm-hmm. but I think there is a way that we can approach our lives, whether we're 20 or 40 or 60 or 80, mm-hmm. that is more thoughtful about, what am I wanting to create? What's the life I'm wanting to create? And how do I do that in a really thoughtful manner? and, you know, being aware of these, or trying to be aware of these tiny little moments that happen, like burning paintings, cleaning glass, you know, having this thought of, I'm done. I've had a good life. I'm done. Not being able to take a breath. I think that those kind of put a pin in it. I hate that phrase.
No, it does. I mean, I think what happened for me too, it's like giving up my, you know, t-shirt business 6 years ago. It was like, you know, I did this because I needed to support my family. They're all grown up now, you know, it's like they're out of the house. So wait, I can not do that. I don't have to necessarily be responsible for other people my whole entire life in a way that compromises who I actually really am, or what my real needs are at this particular moment.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that it's like all about me right now. I mean, that's not really what I meant. I guess it like opens up the possibility to say you make a choice to be and do something for a certain reason for a certain amount of time. And it's okay to give that up and move on to the next thing that becomes more appropriate for the next portion of your life.
Yeah. And maybe that's, you know, that's something to like think about is, not that maybe it's okay, but maybe it's necessary that we pay attention to why we're choosing to take on certain responsibilities at certain times for certain things, and to come to a way of seeing those as, these are commitments that I make held within their own container. They're not like, don't forget that you made those commitments and then just have them kind of be dribbling out for the rest of your life, because your life has changed. Everything else has changed. Why are you necessarily hanging on to commitments that are no longer relevant?
Right. It's true. It's really, you know, every once in a while, and I'm sure you do too, every once in a while I just really miss my father. Really.
Oh yeah. I talk to him a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you do. I do too. I just really, really miss him. And I think, right, he probably missed his father. And the way he used to talk about his father and how he missed his father his whole life. His father died very, you know, when he was 50. His father was 50. And I think this is just a human condition. We're raised by people. Hopefully we absolutely love. Well, we usually absolutely love them, whether or not that's good for us or not sometimes. But, you know, become our, you know, they become part of us in this huge way, and they're never gone because we're made of them, right? So,
right. Literally, yeah.
Yeah, we're literally made of them. So, you know, it's just a way that we connect with them that's different. It's not like physically. So you can miss them and you could suffer through that, or you could just miss them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be suffering. And I think that's important.
Yeah. That's a great, I like that. It doesn't have to be suffering.
No, it doesn't have to be suffering when you miss somebody. It could, you know, it's acceptance. I mean, life is a certain thing, and it's like the intention of anyone in power. Like, what's your intention? What's your intention there? Why are you there? You know, what are you trying to do in your place of power? Are you really trying to help? You know, like the student that I had today who's sending me those damn emails. I was like, you know what? You're a great kid and you probably have talent, but get used to this thing. You need to learn how to upload your stuff. So I kind of feel like I might be the bad lady, but ultimately this kid, who's not that much of a kid, he's like 21, needs to learn how to use this. It's going to be better for him, you know?
Well, it's like learning how to tie your own shoelaces.
Yeah, like, right. Otherwise you'll trip over them the whole time if your mommy's not there to tie them.
Right.
She's not going to be there all the time to tie them.
And it's, you know, I think we all have these leveling up moments where somebody else, you know, we turn to somebody else and say, can you help me with this? And they go, you need to learn how to do this for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes it's great to hear that. And sometimes it's like, that's the last thing I want to hear right now.
I just want you to do it for me.
Right?
Ah!
But ultimately, when we are willing to step into that place of, okay, I'll learn this for myself, it creates so much more. And there's so much more like enrichment is the word that comes to mind, you know, in our lives. So.
Yeah, if you can cross over those thresholds. I mean, it's like I was telling you about in previous conversations that I had been somehow strong-armed into taking an online class to teach online.
Right.
You know, end of January, February. Little did I know that I would be using that very extensively. So it was like kismet, you know, it was one of those things that the universe came together, because I've always wanted to learn it, but it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. I mean, I'm a painter. I like throwing paint around a room, you know.
Yeah.
I like to do best.
Yeah.
But I'm getting good at it. It's getting really fascinating, like the VidGrid thing with the embedded questionnaire. Who would have thought I would have been doing that?
The same thing happened. I remember when you were building your website for your shop in Frenchtown.
Oh, God.
And you started, and you know, every day we are on the phone or we're messaging each other about like, how do I do this? And you got so fascinated that your ability to do that went leaps and bounds ahead of mine. And I was teaching Photoshop and Illustrator, and you're like, no, you have to do it this way and this way and this way. And, you know, because there was this inherent, like, you caught hold of the thing that could take you through the process with curiosity. And
curiosity. Now that's, you know, and that's the part. And I think I was telling you about this, or I was just telling this to somebody, if it was you. But when I've been teaching now for almost 20 years. So what I would, and I'm a piano player. I grew up a pianist and took piano lessons. And I know the value of, you know, learning, it's like learning another language and learning how to transfer that through your body so that you can like read those symbols, like, and have them be, you know, reading music and have them be entirely like integrated, getting your hand muscles to work, you know, all of that eye-hand coordination, brain activity, all of that stuff lining up. And I loved it. I loved playing the piano when I was a kid. And as I was teaching, I would always use these musical metaphors. I still do use musical metaphors. You know, like if you're going to press harder, you're going to release crescendo. You know, like, the volume in your mark. You know, it's like you know, don't write your name so big in it. Don't be such a diva signing your name. It's like, geez, that's kind of a nice drawing, but your signature is like a little bit. Anyway, so I would always ask the class, so, you know, how many of you have taken piano lessons? And it always was like half the class. And then like, as years went by, less and less. This past year, not one of my students had taken piano lessons as a kid. Wow. Not one. That's 63 students.
So interesting.
Not one. And I thought, what's changed? That is it the parents and like creating that opening for them, or thinking that they're going to learn it themselves in some app?
Or the parents didn't learn it.
Maybe the parents didn't learn it, or maybe there was, you know, I don't know. But I know the value of piano lessons or any musical lessons. I know the value of that in understanding how to connect with your own heart center, your own humanity, how to make that brain heart connection and have the external world, all that stuff. It's very important.
Yeah.
It just makes me wonder if curiosity, where curiosity has gone, just the curiousness of understanding how music works, how to read music. What those notes mean, you know, how do they work? How do they connect to this keyboard?
Yeah. And I think, you know, we could do a whole nother talk on curiosity and how that plays into life. That might be the next one we do. Because I think that's a huge piece of what I see missing, and, you know, like the demise of the educational system almost in every country has been pulling all the things out that encouraged curiosity. Yeah. We've gotten, and it's not just in the US, it's, it's not just in the US.
And, well, I mean, if you think about the value of education, we have to justify it. Really?
Yeah. But it's about instilling, you know, for me, education was always about instilling a sense of curiosity in my students, so that they would then run with whatever ideas I threw at them.
Yeah, and that's become harder to do, and that's become fewer and fewer students take that ball and run,
because they don't have that innate sense of curiosity that's been taught to them. Like or encouraged, maybe that's a better word.
No, I think maybe it's encouraged. Maybe it's a feeling like that easy success is out there in the world and it's harder to do it, or maybe
because little kids are always curious. They're great.
They are. I remember when my son was taking guitar lessons, and then he wanted to learn on the electric guitar. I remember all this.
I do remember sitting in your kitchen. Yes, right. With Jack picking out things in the morning. He would play, like, he would pick things out and he'd be like, how do you do this chord?
Yeah, we'd be working together. It's like, okay. But he wanted to play on the electric guitar. And I understood that that's, it's like, cool, you're a boy, you're 12. Yeah. Okay. But my feeling was, you need to learn on an acoustic guitar. You need to develop the muscles in your hands. You just need to do that. Because you're not going to do that on an electric guitar. It's not going to give it to you.
Right.
And he listened to me because he's such a good son. He's such a good boy. And he's got really strong, he is an awesome guitar player. I'm not even being a mom sitting over.
No, he really is. Yeah.
He's just so good.
He's also always curious about doing something. How do I do this thing that I don't know how to do? So
yeah. He's his own learner. He hid himself in his room. Like that first time I heard Grateful Dead coming out of his room, where I found Be Here Now sitting on the kitchen table, I was like, whoa, what have I raised?
So I want to thank you for this amazing conversation. And I'm not kidding. I think we should do a second one on curiosity. That would be really great.
I love
this.
But
really I want to thank you so much, because this was such an in-depth conversation, which is what I really am trying to create. And I love it.
Any other kinds?
No, well, rarely. I'm not interested. Not interested in having the other kinds.
No.
So
the occasional, just kind of flipping thing.
Yeah, but I don't. I also think this kind of conversation, when we can offer it out to other people, it becomes the impetus for them to do the same thing. And so that's my hope and my wish. So, yeah.
It's a good wish.
Yeah. So thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too.
And I'm going to stop the recording for a minute, and then just you and I will hang out for a second.